2:45, so it's time for us to do our job. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to see, actually this is pretty full, this is really good. So thank you for joining us. We have a 90-minute block to talk to you about some amazing things that are happening in Washington State, to kind of paint a picture for you what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how all of the pieces that are in Washington are moving together to reduce suicide amongst veterans and their family members and service members. And how we're doing that, the history that led up to it, starting with the Governor's Challenge, and then working our way down in a funnel system to get you down to the ground level and how we're interacting with these communities. So, let's start off with a little bit of an introductory piece. Hello everyone, my name is Eric Burns. I am the Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program Manager for your Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've been with the DVA for 2 years now as a staff member, and 2 years prior to that as a volunteer with the Vet Corps program. And in my time working in the WDVA, I've seen peer support grow exponentially. The evidence has been building and leaning more and more towards pushing behavioral health into that peer lens, right? Those lived experiences, how we connect with each other, and removing that power dynamic. So as I see the agency and our partners, the nonprofits, the federal levels, the state levels, even the county levels, all evolving, what we're seeing is hope being generated. So it's an absolute pleasure. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Sean Durnan to introduce himself.
Thank you. You're far too kind, my friend. I am Sean Durnan. I am the president of Online Veterans Services. I am also one of the members of the Governor's Challenge team, and I will be talking about that today. But rather than bore yourself with me, I'm going to introduce you to Nejla Munchauer.
My name is Nejla Munchauer. Previously, I was known as Nejla Newman. I've worked in the Washington State area on veteran and family member projects for several years. And I've been lucky to work with 9 Line on the Staff Sergeant Fox grant.
Hello, my name is Erin Cooper. I'm a social worker for the federal VA. I work under suicide prevention for a really unique program that I will talk about later called the Veterans Sponsorship Initiative.
I got it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Rick Kelly. I'm here in my capacity as a volunteer for the ETS sponsorship program slash onward ops program.
Hi, my name is, and I'm scared of this, Sadia McVeigh, and I work with the PTSD Foundation. I am a Warrior Path Guide, and I'm excited to tell you about that in a little bit.
Thank you all, I appreciate your introductions. So we're going to go ahead and kick things off with the Governor's Challenge and the VA's definition of whole health. Take it away, Sean Durnan.
Thank you, Eric. I'm locked in my chair. Okay. So, again, Sean Durnan, president of 9 Line. Today we're going to talk about defining whole health. What is whole health? What does it have an impact on our lives on? When we talk about whole health, how many VA employees do I have in this room right now? Okay, I do not want to confuse this with your guys' whole health coordinated program. This is independent of that, and as I was asked by not Dr. Larry Pruitt to clarify, I just wanted to clarify for the record, this is independent of that program. So coordinated whole health is really taking the holistic approach of the physical, behavioral, spiritual, and socio-economic impact of how we service our veterans, how they're getting access to services, how we're identifying their unique needs and building those pieces into their overall care plan. The reason that is relevant is because this is the first time that we've worked on a cross-sectional piece of the federal, state, nonprofit, and all the different sectors of those regions to come together and identify the best practices in that coordinated whole health, or in this case, all the roads leading to the VA. So it's not just a title, it literally is what we're doing. In collaboration with communities, the organization, we provide the gap coverage. So imagine like that trickle-down effect. We all have those toys, or for those of us who are parents and still have those toys, we know they're for us, they're not for the kids. Stop lying to yourselves. But we have the trickle-down effect, right? So initially, people are going to the VA, they're accessing services, they're getting care. But for those individuals who aren't, that's where our partners at the WDVA come in. So again, it's a trickle-down effect. And then for those individuals who can't get access to WDVA service for whatever reason, or rural outreach or things like that, that's where the nonprofit sector comes in. And again, my friend Rick will be talking about that later on with ETS sponsorship and onward out. But it's really approaching those immediate needs, and it's really helping in coordination of care underneath this initiative. And the Governor's Challenge is not just Washington State's initiative to focus on service members, military veterans, and their families, but also a national initiative. So we're not just coordinating locally, we're coordinating nationally. So for our purposes, any veteran that comes into this state 60, 90 days out, we already know about it. We're gonna help them during that transition period. And that's where the Governor's Challenge comes into play in this. Oh, cool, look at our logos. Okay, so about the challenge. State and communities have been partnering with VA and Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, or SAMHSA, on the Mayor's and Governor's Challenge since 2019. So, when Dr. Pruitt approached us and said, hey, we want to bring together all the community stakeholders, we want to invest the time, the energy, and the effort to figure out where we can create that positive outlet that we discussed just recently, and then how do we break down the rural outreach piece, which was the most important piece when we talk about our rural engagement. Part of that was also understanding the team development and implementation from the National Strategy for Preventing Veteran Suicide. And when we talk about veteran suicide, people automatically think suicidal ideations, they think about those components that come naturally, right? There's so many more pieces to that. When we talk about early intervention, post-vention, early prevention, these are pieces about meeting the veteran where they're at. Suicidal ideation is not something that just happens overnight. There's a trigger, there's a mechanism. So, if we intervene early on, we know for a fact that we can identify the triggers, the mechanisms. It could be divorce, it could be trauma, it could be war-induced things for those of us who served overseas. It can be a plethora of matters. So it allows us to identify not only the triggering mechanisms, but it allows us to also identify the needs of the veterans before they get to that early suicidal ideation stage, or the contributing factors that could lead to that suicidal ideation. The other piece of that is this team works to identify their top priorities, best strategies, and ultimately best practices, right? Everyone in this team brings something to the table, whether it's the federal side of the house, the state side of the house, the nonprofit sector. It's all about how we're coordinating. And again, not only locally, but utilizing our best practices, which we get kudos on all the time for those of you who have attended any kind of recent conference outside of the state. Thank Mary Forbes, she's in here. That's our leader, love her. But it's also making sure that we understand that not one plan will fit every community member and not every strategy will serve to every veteran's needs. So that's where we come in. How do you create a strategy that's going to serve the independent needs of the veterans, the families, and all that? That's where this gets interesting. So, these beautiful circles represent that trickle effect we were talking about, the national level. So the VA's national approach to suicide prevention, what they identify as key components and key practices in helping veterans and their families get through these traumatic times to alleviate the stressors that may cause the suicidal ideations. We then trickle that down into the state level, which again is the Washington State Governor's Challenge. These are key stakeholders in the nonprofit, federal, state arenas that come together to identify the best practices, come together, develop the programming, come together and meet with the different people across the state to help them understand the why, the who, the what, and what we can do to best support them, supporting us, supporting their veterans. The other piece of that is the community engagement and partnerships. And we have several people here who are doing this every day. My own Staff Sergeant Fox team, first plug, if you guys want to raise your hand. Yeah. It was gonna happen, Mary, I'm sorry. So, but there's other components, right? So again, with the WDVA, as Eric was saying, they also have their Staff Sergeant Fox program. And there's many components to this. The other part of that is the peer support and case management and the outreach and education that all affect that community level. Now the goal with this is to focus on the rural outreach or the historical veterans who are not accessing services, whether that be federal, state, having a presence in these rural locations that historically have either bad Wi-Fi, lack of access to Zoom or telehealth, areas that we know have a high population density or population per capita that historically do have suicidal issues or high level ideations or contributing factors like drug abuse or misuse or all the things. This is where we intervene. This is where we allow our stakeholders to come in, identify those trigger areas, and build up the plan from there, and how we focus and really target the needs of the veterans we're serving. Yeah, that sounds about right. They don't pay me because I'm smart, I promise. Anyway, priorities of focus. So when we started the Governor's Challenge, there was 3 focus areas. And I should know these by now since I've been doing this for 5 years, but identifying the service members, veterans, and their families, and screening for suicide risk. Again, when we say suicide risk, it's not one situation, not one shoe fits all, right? We're talking about the early intervention, the direct intervention, there's gotta be a better wording for that, and then the post-vention. So meeting them at every level of their needs and helping them articulate what their needs are, supporting the family dynamic because household 6 needs us too, and helping develop a plan for success. So even during that post-vention piece, 30, 60, 90 days, whatever that may look like, before we exit them out of any program, we know they have the supports in place. The second piece of that is the promoting connectedness and improve care transitions, and that's where I fall in. Group 2 is focused on how do we reach the veterans where they're at? What mechanisms can we put in place to support them, and how do we make these available on a local platform? Not only locally, but on a regional platform. And again, I won't step on my colleagues' feet, but that's what BSI is currently doing, and also how we are all working together to build out the tools, the best practices, so each person in this room and each person across the state has access to those resources and has a working knowledge of what those resources mean. Lastly, increasing lethal means safety and safety planning. Now, the intention of this was, and I know Brett Bass is not in here right now, was firearm safety. But that intervention piece can also mean prescription drugs. It can also mean access to anything that can harm the veteran or the family member. Because again, keep in mind, this initiative, this goal was not only to support the service member, but also the families. So, making sure we can create positive interventions that are not going to conflict with the family dynamic, but support them. And then of course, what we're learning. After identifying service members, veterans, and family members, it is important to have suicide risk screening and referral process for it. And that's where that coordinated effort comes in. Not one of our organizations, not one of our representatives has all the answers. We learned early on in this process, the only way this would work is if we could work together to come out with the best outcomes. So the evidence base is there. We have the data, we have the metrics, we have all the things. And I could talk about this till God knows when, but those are the pieces we cared the most about when we built out this plan. Additionally, the safety planning. How can we help the families identify, support, and keep in place the plan to move forward? And how do we as the organization, the federal government, the state government, make sure that we can do an intervention that's going to be meaningful, long-term, and support. My mouth was open, wasn't it? Thanks, Larry. Making sure that those support mechanisms are in place. It's our goal, right? Like, that's why we're all here. And then, of course, lastly, collaboration with a broad range of organizations, utilizing existing programs and resources. That's what it's all about. Again, when we came to really face this and look at the national numbers, look at the national strategy, working with SAMHSA, and we went to many classes during COVID for just this. Larry remembers, there was some early morning coffee. So that was the goal. How do we collaborate, how do we coordinate, and how do we work effectively by building these metrics, by building these support networks, and how does that all support one another? And that's what you're gonna learn about today. All these amazing people aren't up here just because they're pretty. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry.
Also because they're pretty.
And that leads to the public health approach. Isn't that me, is it? Oh, it is.
Sure is.
I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, but it wasn't my fault, trust me. Okay, so VA's public health strategy. Again, coming back to the national strategy for preventing veteran suicide. We have the community-based approach, means the clinically based approach, which focuses on the full public health model. So essentially what we did was take the services that, whether it was 9-Line, whether it was the PTSD Foundation, whether it was BSI, we found non-clinical efforts for early intervention, meaning meeting people on that peer-to-peer level, not only that peer-to-peer level, but helping them understand their goals, their strategies, their needs, and bringing them forward so we can do the initial triage, provide the support, connect them with the resources, and get them to that most important clinically based intervention piece. And that's where the VA, WDVA, all those pieces came into play. Again, catchy on words, right? All roads lead to the VA, all roads lead to whole health. Kind of catching the symbology there? Symbolism? I said symbology. Wow.
Good work.
Yeah, I know, right? I'll take it. So, but that is really what that public health model looks like. So, we focused on the most rural areas. These are people who historically, again, did not have access or the means to get to the VA, to get to the WDVA. But we built those structures and put them in place so we can make that transition easier. So when they had that early peer-related engagement, they knew that they weren't alone. And that was the most important piece. Helping them identify they were not the only ones out there going through this, and they're not gonna ever be the only ones out there going through this. And then helping them have confidence enough to move towards that clinically based intervention. And that's where Larry and his team and BSI and everything came into play. And that is all I have for you folks, but I will let Aaron Cooper take over. Thanks, Aaron.
Push your button. Click, don't forget to click. Click.
I'm gonna stand over here so you can help see my slides. First of all, I want to welcome everybody, and I kind of want to echo something that came out in this morning's meeting with the WDVA and the whole panel, was how to access care. And then if you notice somebody had a question and if somebody else didn't know how to answer it, have that resource. Somebody else in the room stood up and said, hey, that's what we do, or here's this resource. And that is the whole basis of what we're trying to do, is to create this network where if what I have doesn't fulfill a need because of my capacity, an enrollment eligibility issue, or there's weight to connect you with care, there might be somebody out in the community that I can connect you with. So in order to do that, we have the Veteran Sponsorship Initiative, which works with community partners across the state and nationwide through Onward Ops to be able to connect folks with these resources as a two-way street, right? So if I have somebody in a VA that is looking for community resources, I can refer them off. Somebody in the community is looking for a way to help connect a veteran they're assisting with VA resources, they can connect them with us. As you know, like, nobody goes it alone. We all have to depend on each other and work together. There's just too much. There's just too much of a need. There's a lot of resources, but connecting those resources can be really, really difficult. And so that takes us to the Veteran Sponsorship Initiative, and that goes back to basically nobody goes it alone. It's a partnership between federal, state, nonprofit organizations. So you have where there's eligibility criteria for one group, maybe this other group can fill that void. And it is an overlapping of resources. So, and that's by design. So again, if there's a capacity issue, if there's a wait time, if there's not providers, if there's something that I can't help you with, I know who to pass you along to, right? We work together as a team to support our family being veterans and their family. For VSI specifically, we are looking to get upstream of the problem, and so we connect with DOD folks, so folks that are still active duty. Right, the VA historically has only reached out, wait till you become a veteran. You pick up your DD-214, your separation date comes, now we talk to you. Well, now we are working with Onward Ops to get ahead of the ball and work with them a year before they even transition out to ensure that they are able to make a transitioning plan. They know what resources are available in the community they're moving to. And we do that in several different ways. One of our biggest ways is we train volunteer sponsors across the nation, and we connect that volunteer sponsor with that transitioning service member a year before they get out to help them navigate all this. And then we support you, the volunteer sponsor, as you support the active duty transitioning service member. And I have literature up here I can hand out if anybody's curious to learn more about those details. All right, right. Another thing that we do is we provide virtual gap coverage care. So if you're transitioning out of, say, Texas, you're moving to Washington, you can't apply for VA healthcare in Washington because you're not here yet, right? So while you're taking the 3 months to drive across the country, instead of losing all that precious time as you're waiting for the system to kick in and get your doctor's appointment, we literally can send you to a virtual primary care provider within the VA. So now you're vested within the VA, which opens up doors for urgent care and community care. Refill your prescriptions if you need it, if your DOD medications are running out, and you don't have you're not at your destination city yet and set up with your local VA. Our doctors can write you those prescriptions. Also mental health, if you are seeking mental health care, we do have options for virtual mental health care because we're federal. Our licensures do cross state boundaries, so we don't have that. We're really unique and we don't have that restriction. All right, and we do this, so the year on each side of the transition period is known as the deadly gap. And that is where the suicide rates spike almost 4 times higher than any other point in a veteran active duty service member's life is during this deadly gap. And in the military, when you PCS, usually you get a sponsor at your destination that you're going to. VSI partnering with Onward Ops, we try and do that similar. That goes back to the volunteer sponsor that I mentioned earlier that we train. And so again, it's just connecting with those local resources in the destination community so the veteran doesn't feel alone or lost while they're going through this huge identity change, this loss of purpose, this loss of, all the supports they had while they were serving under DOD. All that can look a lot different. There can be a lot of strain on the family supports as well. So by working with community partners, not only are we supporting the veteran, but also their family. And then over to the right, that's a lot of the research that's came out to support this. If anybody is interested, I can email you these papers. All right, so right now, who we are, Veteran Sponsorship Initiative, our regional community coordinators lead up different parts of the nation. I am Region 9, which is 9 states out here in the West. And one of our biggest things that we've been able to do is to really understand and try and streamline the enrollment and eligibility process of getting somebody connected to care. Because that was another recurring kind of theme this morning was how do we access care? And so, long story short, to your VSO, thank you for your hard work and being the door to get people their service connection and into VA healthcare. What you're doing is really a very proactive way to not only prevent suicide, but also setting them up for success in their new chapter of their life that they're going into. And so not only do we help them navigate all the different nuances of enrollment, we work with eligibility office, so there's nuances that might apply to some folks and not others. We work with them to make sure that we get everybody connected so they're not told they're not eligible for VA healthcare wrongly, incorrectly. I was working with a veteran the other day, 9 years, he was told he was not eligible for VA healthcare. Talked with my eligibility office, got him connected to healthcare, he wasn't eligible. So another thing that we do is these clinical triages. So we do mental health assessments, we do the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Score, PHQ-2, just to find out where they're at, and we do these at different time points to see how they're doing in their transition. And again, if something pops up, they're not connected to their local VA yet, or there's an excessive wait time where somebody's waiting for 4 or 5 months to connect with their primary care provider or mental health professional. We use this virtual care platform to connect them. Usually right now, the waiting is about 2 weeks to get them connected with a doctor. And then again, the two-way communication with our community partners. Nobody does it alone, can't stress that enough. We work really closely. I've worked with Nylon with homeless vets before, actively, on the street, get the call at midnight from Tony saying, hey, how do I get this? I got this veteran, he's suicidal, he's homeless, how do I connect him with care? And we work to triage the situation and help that veteran. So there's a lot of collaboration at the ground level with this partnership that has been essential to actually be productive and get stuff done. And it's been life-changing for all involved, veterans and us as a team, because it's very rewarding. All right, so to go over our virtual care platforms, again, primary care doctors, psychologists, medical support, we got the whole gambit. Those providers can write prescriptions. Again, the vested status within the VA is really big and critical for accessing community care and urgent care that's not at a VA facility. And then we also do warm handoffs. So if somebody's in our virtual clinic and now they're established where they're moving to, they're finally settled in, we can do warm handoffs to their local VA so they don't get lost in those cracks. VSI Plus, these are for the acute mental health crisis. So again, if they're not established at their local VA, this team works to help people that score positive for suicide, or there's also the 17 questionnaire that's identifies people for high risks of suicide, and they work to provide this gap case management until they can connect with their local VA and be seen locally. Just some data about how effective our program is. The one in blue is the Veteran Sponsorship Initiative. 51% of those that we're working with still serving in the military were successfully enrolled into the VA, where TAU, that's transition as usual, only 34% were able to get through the enrollment and eligibility process. And those numbers grow every day. And then actually get connected to primary care, because until you get connected to a primary care provider, there's still some doors that are closed. You need to get that vested status, and that's how you do it, is get seen by a primary care. And so again, what's statistically significant, 43% of those that go through DSI have already been connected with their primary care compared to transition as usual. And again, if you like data, you want the research, I can email it to you. And these are our current community partners that we work with. We're always looking to expand. So if you are an organization, you'd like to work with us, please see me. I have cards I can give you. I'd love to talk with you about expanding this network. Thank you.
So,
Make it green. Screen.
so my name is Rick Kelling again, and I'm actually on leave from the WDVA at this point, and I'm representing the ETS sponsorship program / Onward Ops as a volunteer. So I retired from the Army in 2020, and not shortly after my official retirement date, a couple folks from one of the units that I served with contacted me and asked me if I wanted to get involved in a veteran support organization that they were trying to get off the ground here on the West Coast. And it just didn't appeal to me at the time, because at the time I knew there were a tremendous amount of veteran support organizations. I took part in a number of the transition assistance programs. Some of them were mentioned this morning. I did an internship. My command at the time afforded me plenty of time to go through the Army's transition assistance program, which I was very thankful for, and it just didn't appeal to me. So they gave me the information for the program, and they told me to think about it, right? That's a common approach. And so I did. And one of the reasons why I decided to volunteer, first as an individual sponsor and then as a program advocate, if you will, was because I thought this program provided value, okay? I didn't, at the time, I wasn't aware of another program that did what this program was trying to do. And it was in its infant stages. So I, bold and unafraid, I said I would volunteer, and these guys were friends of mine. And so here I am. In truth, I started working with the WDBA in September of 2022, so last year. And so since I started working, my volunteer efforts have kind of died down. But I'm still keeping up with the information. I share information with other program and community partners, and I'm happy to be here as part of a partnership of what we are trying to accomplish here in Washington State. So I'm going to go out of order, and I'm going to ask Eric to advance the slides 3 times. Yep. So just to reiterate, and this is how ETS sponsorship sees the problem that we're trying to solve. And it's already been mentioned a couple times up there. And the big thing is, how do we address the gap? And it's referred to here as the deadly gap, and Aaron mentioned it. In that 12 months, for some people it's longer, for some people it's shorter. When that service member transitions from an environment where they're in a cocoon to an environment where they're in the mainstream and they're the ones who have to help themselves. And we refer to that as the deadly gap. And often, if they aren't part of a peer support program, okay, raise your hand if you work or volunteer with a peer support program. I know all the VetCorps members do, and I know all the volunteer sponsors do. And you know the value of traveling, your journey or making that transition journey with a peer. More often than not, they're a veteran. Sometimes they aren't. But often they're making this transition on their own, okay? And they're having a lot of negative outcomes because of that. The military service transition programs, they give you a lot of information. It's in a very short period of time relative based on your circumstances of discharge, and it's overwhelming, okay? So it's often reactive, okay? There are a number of veteran support organizations out there, and a lot of times, not necessarily in Washington State, the federal, state, county, and local programs aren't synchronized. That's why I'm excited about what Washington's trying to do here, because it's serving as that connective tissue for these federal, state, and local programs. So I'm going to take the easy way out, and I'm going to show you a quick video, okay? Because I'm a volunteer, and if you go up 2, and we're going to hit this. So Mike Eastman is the director of the ETS sponsorship program, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the naming, ETS versus onward ops. But I'm going to let him talk about the concept.
Well, maybe not.
We're excited to be here at this conference. Talking to Mike East, that is the director for the ETS sponsorship program. Mike, thanks for joining us today to talk about the
Here,
role
well,
of
this
data
one.
and
Keep going.
technology to serve our service members. That start by asking, your program aims to help our U.S. veterans. Can you share what makes Onward Ops unique, and what problem are you trying to solve with it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. But there are absolutely thousands of organizations in the country that aim to support veterans. And we're not in any way trying to replace their work. But I would argue that the statistics that we see show that there is still work to be done. Veteran suicide remains unacceptably high. We still struggle in the veteran community with unemployment, underemployment, homelessness. And part of that is due to a systemic way we approach transition. It isn't in any way a negative reflection on these organizations. They're all doing great work. But they are inherently reactive. When someone takes off the uniform to go return to civilian life, they are navigating that journey on their own. They have to know, A, to ask for help, and B, who to ask. And so our organization wants to invert that. We want to go from reactive to proactive, connect with these service members early, determine what it is that they and their families need, and then steer them to the best available resources in the community they're going to live in. So it's really empowering those already doing the work rather than replacing them. by making this a much more streamlined and personalized process.
And then how does a partnership with Google fit in with your mission?
Yeah, so the core of what we do is connecting a service member to a sponsor from the community they're moving to. Each of these veterans needs to know that someone out there still cares, and someone can answer the questions that any of us would ask if we were making a major life change. Where do I live? Where do the kids go to school? How's the job market? You can't get that at the federal level, you get that from the local level. We do that through our sponsors. But we have to empower the sponsors with a way to connect with service members that could be geographically across the world. Google allows us to do that. It really supercharges this relationship. Through the tools and workspace, they can collaborate in geographically separate areas in real time on resumes and on budgets. They can connect over video with chat or with Google Meet. So what it really does is it takes what we know to be important, a human relationship, sponsor to service member, and then empowers it with technology to make it just that much more effective. We really couldn't do it without these sorts of tools.
Well, in keeping with the theme of today's conference, what role does data play in what you're trying to accomplish?
Yep, our program is built on trust, right? They have to trust, new veterans, folks leaving the military have to trust that we have their best interests at heart. Part of that, to me, is that they own their data, so that everything we do is with their consent, and any data that they do consent to give us is secure. So again, the partnership with Google, the fact that we can use Google Cloud services and the high level of security allows us to say with great confidence that what you tell us will be safe, it will not be exposed to unnecessary risk. And the other part of this for me with data is that we want to be able to quantitatively prove that what we're doing works. Tons of organizations can assess what you need and connect you to a service. We want to take it that next step. You know what you needed, we connected you to a service. How long did it take you to get it? Were you satisfied or not? And then as you look over the next hill, we want to move into the predictive space. How long did it take you with this particular set of skills from the military to get a job in this particular region? And then that sort of fine-grained analysis you could expand across healthcare and real estate and the rest.
And then finally, how can our audience help more in this mission to serve our veterans?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a really simple way. We would love to have as many Americans as possible sign up as sponsors. And I'll tell you why. I'm a veteran myself. I just finished 30 years in the Army. And it is no mystery that Americans across this country want to and love to support the military. The challenge is, how do you do that? And in most cases, you default to a symbolic gesture. Because there's really no better way. You could donate to a cause, or you can fly a flag, or you can shake a hand. And those things are great, but becoming a sponsor is a genuine way to impact the life of another human being, a new veteran that's going to be your neighbor in your community. It'll cost you an hour a week, maybe, just to answer questions. And you will be changing the life of that veteran and their family for the better, probably making a friend in the process. Relatively low cost, but absolutely high payoff. So I would say, consider becoming a sponsor for our program. We would love to have you.
Well, Mike Eastman, thank you for joining us here at Defense Talks and just sharing some of the ways that you're sharing your service in a new way and helping veterans in the process. So thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So that concludes my briefing. What are your questions?
No questions yet.
Just kidding. So what jumped out at you about Mike's description of the program? And a couple people can't answer in here. Anybody? Just say it. Give me a word. Anything?
Connection.
Connection. Okay, we talked about if you were in Chaplain Brewer's presentation on moral injury, right? Connection. What else?
Importance. So like the importance of acknowledging, the challenges that, soldiers have, especially within, the transitioning outside of the military. And one of the things that you mentioned was, the high suicide rate, amongst veterans. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Anybody else?
Community.
Okay. Good. I mean, what jumps out at me is we're trying to get upstream. I mean, it's already been said, it's kind of taken for granted sometimes. But this program, and I'm going to explain just a little bit about the process, tries to get upstream and work upstream. And it's about, peer support and that individual getting somebody to walk their transition journey with them, okay? So just in the next 37 slides, I'm just going to go through a little bit of the program, okay? I think I got 5 slides and we've already hit 2 of them. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this is the ETS sponsorship, on paper. It's a 501c4 not-for-profit organization, okay? ETS sponsorship was the original name, and it stands for, if you're an Army veteran or if you're affiliated with the Army, it stands for Expiration Term of Service Sponsorship Program. So that didn't resonate with all the military services. So what they did at the national level where business is conducted, they've retained the name ETS Sponsorship Program. So if you look up, the DC tax exempt, filing, it's going to say ETS sponsorship. All the memorandums of agreement are filed with ETS sponsorship. They just went through a rebranding of the outward-facing action element of the program is actually onward ops. Okay, it's aspirational, we're moving forward, right? We're trying to live in the present, but we're moving forward, right? Not what should be, what is. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm using some of the vernacular from the last class. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about process here from a service member's perspective. You can sign up to 12 months prior to your actual separation date. Okay, an ETS sponsorship onward ops program does not discriminate on your characterization of service upon discharge. Okay, family members, we want to help everybody. The end state goal here is ensuring a successful transition. Okay, if you think of the aspirational, we want to make that veteran and their service family contributing members of their gaining community versus the opposite. But the opposite is what we're focused on. We're focused on reducing the stressors that are associated with transition. Okay, and lowering that veteran suicide rate, all the numbers associated with veteran suicide. And what we do is we take volunteers throughout the community, and you heard the call to action, so Mike's a very good speaker, right? He sticks to his talking points no matter what the question was. He ends with a call to action, right? And those were softballs, okay? Volunteers throughout the community, if you're an ETS sponsor or an onward ops sponsor, raise your hand. So Mary Forbes, Aaron Cooper, an executive with the Washington Department of Veterans Affairs, and a clinical or social worker with the Department of Veterans Affairs are sponsors. Anybody can be a sponsor, okay? The prerequisite for being a sponsor is what?
You have to be a veteran?
No.
You care.
You have to care, okay? You do have to care to be a sponsor. So they go through training that Aaron and the federal VA, the VHA, okay, have put together, all right? It's non-clinical training, okay? So you're taught the basics of sponsorship, okay? And you come into the organization, you're vetted first if you're a sponsor, and then you are connected with transitioning service members who are coming to the local community that you live, work, breathe, and raise your family with, okay? Ideally, you have an understanding of all those domains, housing, employment, but it's okay if you don't, because we link you up, or the program links you up with what we call, on the Onward Ops ETS sponsorship side, a community integration coordinator, okay, or a community partner, which is an organization like King County Veterans Program, like Lacey Veteran Services Hub, like Nine Line Veteran Services, who have those connections and can help that sponsor help the transitioning service member and their family navigate their personal transition plan. Not everybody needs help getting a job. Some people want to go to school, right? Some people have some serious housing needs. It's usually tied to resources, finance, something like that. So as a sponsor, you don't have to have all the questions. You gotta care, you make a connection, okay? You're connected with a hub in the community, a veteran support organization in the community who can help with those referrals, both before the service member transitions, right? During their transition, and then after their transition. And it's all kind of fungible. 12 months, 16 months, 18 months, some people do it in less time. But I'm gonna talk about a couple tools that make this program a little more unique. Questions on that? Okay, so that's the macro concept, and we do it in partnership with the federal VA. We are working with the Department of Defense, and right now it's Army-centric, okay? We've had a lot of success with the Army. They're the largest service component, okay? And it just so happens all the founding fathers of this program, guess what? They were wearing US Army over their, or on their chest. So, but we're growing, okay? There's a program now that's growing in San Diego with the Navy forces in San Diego, okay? And Department of Labor is coming up later, and I'm not really qualified to talk about the partnership with the Department of Labor. Advance 2, please. So what makes the program different? You've already talked about some of it, right? We get upstream, okay? We're trying to get the program awareness, build program awareness on as many military installations as possible, okay? And we're trying to get into JBLM, all right? But up to 12 months before you transition. So when do we start planning, our next day? Hopefully it's not when we get up in the morning, right? We're already laying our stuff out for exercising, or if we're gonna walk our dog, or if we're gonna take our kids, we're checking our calendar, we're doing all these little things just for day-to-day stuff, okay? We want to encourage service members to do that planning 12 to 18 months before they transition, right? Just like you were told when you were starting your transition, you guys should be here at least 12 months, taking your TAP class before your transition. And I know the reality is different for everybody, okay? There's 2 paths. If you want to elect to have a sponsor, you can sign up to have a sponsor. You can be particular about what kind of sponsor you're comfortable with, okay? Or you can elect to go on your own, or what the website calls solo. And if you elect to go solo, then you're given a number of transition tools, which includes making, a planning template to make your own transition plan, okay? And if you elect to go with your sponsor, you'll be connected with somebody who's like you, all right? And that community integration coordinator is responsible for all the sponsors in their geographic area. So they manage the sponsors and they manage that transitioning service member sponsor pair. Okay, so ideally they're connecting you with a like person, place or thing, person, right? Just making sure if you guys are listening. Okay, but that sponsor is going to be in the community that you as a transitioning service member want to move in. So that they know where the best place to get coffee is. They know about the local schools, ideally, okay? They know where to shop, okay? They know where not to go, okay? And they're connected with organizations like 9-Line Veteran Services in Pierce County, okay? One of the other unique items about the program is you get access through Google Workspace to an information dashboard. Okay, I mentioned developing your individual transition plan. Okay, you do that with your sponsor's help, okay, using tools that are provided you in that Google Workspace. Now that information dashboard, the service member opts into. They get to say what information is shared and what's not shared. Okay, it's HIPAA compliant, it works behind the DoD, it's been approved by DoD, okay? But it's totally up to the service member to provide their consent based on what they're comfortable with. All right, so now you've got an information tool that sticks with you before, during, and after your transition. The sponsor sees what the service member wants them to see, the community integration coordinator also gets access to that information, because all the referrals and making sure that sponsors are keeping the service members on track is made through this dashboard. What the great thing about Google Workspace is that you can use this thing, you can use that thing, you can use a tablet. It's all connected, okay? It's all connected, and it's linked to an analytics platform that I'm going to show you just some of the information that community integration coordinators and other folks can see to get to know their population of veterans, okay? So just a couple more things about what makes this program different, all right? So for the veterans' perspective, they get a local sponsor, okay? Where's your service member at right now?
Right now, Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon, Virginia.
No. Isn't it Mount Vernon, Washington?
Okay, and did they transition from somewhere else?
Texas.
Okay, so they came from Texas. Mary doesn't live in Mount Vernon. Ideally, she would, okay, or in the Mount Vernon area. So the program's growing, okay? But you get ideally you get a local sponsor, okay? If everything works right, you know, your anxiety about transition, much less just the move across country from Texas to Washington State, is much less stressful. Okay, so you're reducing all those stressors, because sponsors and whoever your CIC is, I think it's Sean, is helping you do that. So you get access to those services, whatever they need in the housing, education, employment, social, family domains that you are needing for your transition journey. You've got a secure information chain when all of this comes online, because it's not quite online yet. And then the veteran gets a community that's going to wrap their arms, for lack of a better expression, around that service member. From a community's perspective, you're seeing these veterans coming in 6 to 12 months out, okay? Ideally, you're addressing their issues or their challenges before they become issues or problems, okay? And we like to plan and think in the ideal. Of course, we live in reality, okay? And then, of course, the net outcome of all this is you're preventing all those negative outcomes. Okay. So this is some of the information, and these are from June. I think the July ones were just published. So on the left is some information on the service members. Okay, the majority are males. Okay. Significant concerns about their upcoming transition. And you can see the marital statistics in the top 12 destinations. And this is always going to change. And what I did is I chose to put some of the medical stuff on the right side. There are a number of data points that this program in the dashboard can report out on. But this is some of the information, and communities can use this information to make decisions. Hang on one second. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, really, that's what I have, and I know there's at least one question, so maybe I communicated something that I shouldn't have, or you've got a great thoughtful question, which is probably the case.
I hope that's the one. Curious if it's common for sponsors to be partnered up with more than one PTSD service member.
So it really depends on your capacity. Ideally, it's a one-on-one, okay? But I know there's sponsors who are partnered with multiple service members. So if you think about the transition geographically where a lot of service members are moving to, they're moving home, okay, or moving to states like Texas, Florida, okay. Washington has financial benefits for veterans, right? That's why I retired here, one of them. Okay, so these are the areas, and so this data right here doesn't necessarily reflect the larger service population, because right now we're signing up about 1,700 enrollees, service members are enrolled in the program, but we hope that becomes like 17,000, and it'll be more reflective. Yes.
Another thing that you're teaching service members is really how to ask for help from a person as well. Like this last summer, I broke my foot and I lost my voice because I became so dehydrated because I live alone because I couldn't ask anybody for help.
Sure.
And I've been out of the military for like over a decade. And I finally had to realize that I was going to die if I didn't ask for help, and I didn't want to die of a broken foot. And so it's like really great that instead of, you're changing the way that we think, instead of saying, where do I find this information, which was what we learned in the military, to who do I go to, and like giving them that connection with a person and them asking a person for help is like, that's a skill that we didn't learn in the military.
Yeah. So, I mean, a quote that I heard is instead of making 1,000 calls, by that service member or their spouse for assistance and trying to navigate and find the assistance that they need, they get 10 or 15 calls from very specific organizations who already know what their need is and are local to the community that they're moving to. Okay? Thanks for that prompt.
Actually, if we
Yes,
could
ma'am.
just hold the rest of the questions slide
So-
of the presentation.
My
Okay.
apologies.
Yep,
Let's
sorry.
hold all discussion points and questions until the end. We have a ton more content to present you still.
Yes, and I don't want to
You're in trouble,
hijack.
Rick. No.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next up, we're going to start moving into our Staff Sergeant Fox programs, right? And actually, my line.
Gosh, thank you, my friends.
Yeah, of course. And there's your clicker. So you can click
Brilliant. Once upon a time, there was a veteran, and it was you, or someone you love, or someone you know who loves someone else. We're all here because veterans are an integral part of this conversation, and we love them, and we interact with them regularly. So if you take a look at our 9-line service programs, we're working on the QRF program, which is funded by the Staff Sergeant Fox grant. We have some other projects under the 9-line banner that we're going to talk about. And then our Root Step program is our outdoors program. When you hear 9-line, I want you to think of home, housing, outdoor programs, mental health, education, and employment. Okay? I've been doing this, I've been working in veteran suicide for over 25 years. We are a lot smarter and a lot more able to help people than we were 25 years ago. There has been a lot of history with a lot of veterans in the VA, and some of it's been a difficult history. And sometimes it was hard to get people to listen, but the VA is listening, and they are amending practices, and they are working with veterans and veteran family members to try and support folks that have had difficulty historically. And these partnerships are a testament to that. The latest round is the Staff Sergeant Fox program. It's a suicide prevention program, intentional to add coordination at the community level in order to support state and federal programming. So I'm not going to pay for you to go to the doctor, but I'm going to help you with peer support and housing and employment and education and referrals until we can figure out what clinical use is good for you. Smile and nod your head if that makes sense. Brilliant. Okay. So from a Staff Sergeant Fox perspective, from 9-line, we work in these 10 counties. We wrote the 10 counties, didn't change the 9. We added a county. We picked these counties out because they are ripe for help. We have a mix of urban and rural counties. We have been very well received in all of the counties. If you live in or near one of these counties, let me know. I'd like to coordinate with you. So this talks about some of the coordination that we do every day. We coordinate with our federal partners, our state partners, our local partners, and we work with our nonprofit and many other nonprofits to support all kinds of community needs. We work with prevention services. Who knows what prevention means?
You stop it from happening.
Stop it from happening. We work with intervention. What does intervention mean?
You stop it while
Also
it's happening.
stop it from happening. Excellent. That was, gosh, I'm so glad I pay you for this. We also work in postvention services. So after an incident, 9-line can come in and work with folks because one of the problems with suicide is that it can occur in bundles. right? So when you see something happening anywhere in the stream, you want to step in and try and support and give help. We provide a ton of services in housing, outdoor programming, employment, mental health. If you need support, we will find something to support you. If it looks like we have fun, it's because we do. So one of the things that we work in to support veterans struggling is housing programming. We have traditional and transitional and long-term sustainable housing. If you don't work in housing, you don't really care. Long story short, some folks need short-term help, some folks need longer-term assistance. We work with any kind of folks who need whatever kind of assistance. We have our case managers that focus on addressing those individual needs of our veterans to help get them to the next step. Employment services, we have on-site employment for some folks, but we also partner with WorkSource to help our veterans be able to find their next project and access those things that will allow them to get moving in the direction that they want and need to go. For mental health services, we rely heavily on our peer support system, but we also have access to our folks at the VA for help who have been beyond attentive and helpful, folks at the WDVA likewise, and community folks that will support in the meantime while we're figuring out where folks need to go. We also work with our local continuum of care to try and address systemic housing issues. And for us, that's quite a bit of coordination because of those multiple counties. Our Root Step Outdoor program is led by our team here. There has been a lot of research showing the use and the utility of taking folks outdoors. We build upon this by trying to create therapeutic opportunities as well as just being outside and getting all the gains from that. That you just experienced from being outside. Camaraderie, peer support. There are programs that focus on art therapy, equine therapy, clinical interventions. You need a project, we'll help you find one. See, it does look like we have fun, doesn't it? Okay.
Thank you, Nash.
Thank you.
So my name is Sadi McVeigh, and I am from the Permission to Start Dreaming Foundation. And they are working also with the Staff Sergeant Fox grant, which is really, really cool because this is a peer-to-peer piece of it. So the Permission to Start Dreaming Foundation initially, Leslie Main is the founder of our organization, and she lost her son Kyle to an accidental and/or purposeful suicide. Nobody really knows. Kyle was in the VA system when he left Iraq, and he had a TBI as well as PTSD. He was an inpatient and they were caring for him, and there was a point that they needed a bed space, and they thought that Kyle could manage his meds on his own. The morning that Kyle was released, he checked himself into a Baltimore hotel, and by the end of that evening, Kyle was dead, either on accident and or on purpose. So then you had a mom, Leslie Main, who went into a deep struggle for about 2 years, and really was also suicidal herself, actually tried to drown herself at one point, but then that didn't work. The water pushed her back in. And so she has 3 other grown children, and how does she manage then as a mom? And what can she do to make a difference for veteran suicide? And so she created the Permission to Start Dreaming, and somebody had written PTSD at an event that she went to, and somebody wrote in tiny writing, Permission to Start Dreaming. Leslie made that her motto, because how can you change the life of young people and are people that are transitioning out and give them permission to start dreaming again? And that's basically what she did. And the first way that she did that was by creating a race for a soldier in Gig Harbor. So she would earn money, people would sign up for the race, and she would give it to other veteran organizations. Then magic happened. She went to visit her son, and I say magic because it is magic. In 2014, Kyle was buried in Virginia, and Leslie went to Virginia to visit her son's grave. And she went for a walk in that area in Bluemont, and she stumbled upon Boulder Crest, Virginia, by a guy named Ken Falk, who created Warrior Path. Path is a pretty powerful program, and so then she wanted to bring Path to Washington State, which she was able to do in 2021, and I'll explain that. So Warrior Path, the beauty of it, it was brought here, and there's actually a participant in this class right now. There's someone that just recently went to Path. It is a pretty profound program. And the idea is to change your struggle somehow into post-traumatic growth. That you can figure out a way that because of your trauma, because of your struggle, and not in spite of it, that you can live the best life because you deserve that and your family deserves the best version of you. And so that's what happened, and one participant said that. Lots. We are actually at 26. We just finished our Warrior Path 26, and one of the graduates are in here. So what does PATH do? So it really, as I said, it's the idea of creating and changing post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth. And we needed that here in Washington State. There are 11 paths right now across the nation, organizations that have worked with Boulder Crest Foundation, Ken Falk, who created Warrior Path. And the idea is that you can take a training program because veterans thrive in training. And not to say that we don't do well in clinical, because we can as well, but we were forged for many of us, very, very young age in a training process. And we thrive in training. And that's what Warrior Path is. And so, turn this off. I'm sorry. So PATH, what is it? Progressive Alternative Training for Helping Heroes. And what that means is literally learning how to take your struggle. I'm a mom that lost my own son to suicide. Leslie gave me the gift of PATH in 2017. I went to PATH, I didn't know what it was. Day one of PATH, I knew that if my son had gone to PATH, much like Kyle, he would be alive today. So that training, what does it mean? It's 7 days of intensive training on site. You actually come to Pilgrim Firs, an area here that we have in Port Orchard that we rent right now until we get our own national campaign and get our own site. And you come for 7 days. It's 75 contact hours. You are drinking out of a fire hose. It is intense. And within that, it carries on after the 7 days for 83 more days where you watch videos 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 minutes a day. And then you have 5 calls with the team that you go to PATH, which is 8 people thereabout. There could be 8 people total. And your assigned PATH guide. Every PATH guide has gone to Warrior Path. Every PATH guide had some sort of struggle. And they were able to take that there and turn it into something different, into a change, because that's what it matters. And how do you do that? Well, there's phases of post-traumatic growth. The first is trust and connection, and I heard the word connection a lot, but that means real connection, connecting to people because that matters, because you care, and somewhere along the way, we as veterans, we learn to isolate. We learn to think we can do this alone, or nobody can understand our struggle. So trust and connection, and that environment is created there. And then it's about education. That is that 75 contact hours, and hopefully that you continue to learn, right, because that's powerful. Knowledge is power. And then it's about regulation. We teach greater than 31 wellness practices. You got to figure out the ones that you like, the ones that resonate with you. And we say practices, not tools. Because practices, if you do every single day, like let's say you play an instrument, or let's say you're an artist, whatever it is, but if you do that stuff every single day, it becomes ingrained in you and a part of your DNA. And so regulation matters. And how does it matter? Why is that? Because most of us are very, very reactive. That's what we do. That's what we're trained to do. And it works out in the field, but it doesn't work when we come back into our house. And life is still going to happen. You're still going to struggle. But if you're regulated, oh my God, you get to struggle better because you pick the ones that work for you. And that's what makes it able for you to literally to respond. And then it's about disclosure, dumping your story, whatever that may be, telling your story because that matters. And sometimes we talk about an imaginary backpack that we just keep shoving stuff in. We do that. We hold those things together, that suck it up attitude that we are taught to have in our training, quite honestly. And from the time that you are born, you're actually poking stuff in that bag because you're taught to do that. But if you can lay it down honorably, tell your story because story matters, take a knee, remove a mask, and really connect with other people because story is so important. My God, and you can get that off, and maybe it's shame, whatever it is, but to share it and to tell it, it matters. And then it's about story, meaning a new story. I get to snatch that pen back, and because of my struggle, not in spite of it, I get to write a new story. And then the last part of PATH is service. It is a training program to create leaders again. Because veterans and first responders, that's what they thrive in. And to take that back and to help somebody else, there is no better person than somebody that has struggled. And that's what PATH can give you. So that you can be the best version of yourself, live the life that you deserve, and be better for your family. whatever that means, a better husband, a better wife, a better neighbor, a better mom, a better dad, it doesn't matter. And PATH can give you that. It is powerful. Get caught in the slides. All right. These graphs here, when we have somebody come to PATH, the first thing they do is an acceptance survey. And in that acceptance survey, there is the CSSR, the PHQ-9 is in that. And we ask separately a PS survey and a SES survey. And within those surveys, though, they use that. And you can see this graph here. I don't have a little pointer. I don't know how to use it. Let me go with that. So the acceptance survey is when they first say, yes, I want to go to PATH. And you can see on this first slide here, they got a pretty high threshold for PTS. Well, the second one is on the day that they arrive. When they arrive at PATH that night, they do that same survey again. And it asks them the CSSR, the PHQ-9, as well as other pieces, which I'll talk about on the next piece of that. And then when they are at day 7, they are on a honeymoon high. Because if we control that environment for 7 days and we gave them pressure, and then we taught them how to release. So you can see right here how low it went on day 7. And then day 90. That they are still maintaining and sustaining post-traumatic growth. It is pretty amazing. And the other survey there, the other one there, is showing that post-traumatic growth and sustainment of post-traumatic growth. And how is that possible? Because I mentioned the phases of post-traumatic growth, but then there's domains. And inside these surveys that they get asked, it's also these 4 domains of post-traumatic growth, and that we call it SPAN. Spiritual and existential change, and what does that mean? That is my why. That's that gutty feeling or whatever, that light within my stomach, my purpose. Why am I here? And I can say for myself, especially after losing my son, I had no clue what I was going to do, even if I could bring another day tomorrow. But finding purpose because of my loss and lighting my fire, that's what I had, SPAN. So it's the first piece. The second piece is personal strength. If I can survive that, my God, I can survive anything. Anything at all. And then appreciation for life. And that doesn't matter. That could be the tiny things, a nice cup of coffee today. My God, I had a hot shower. 3-ply or 2-ply toilet paper. It doesn't matter what it is because those things matter, but you have to find that stuff every single day. Appreciation for life. And the beauty of growth is that it allows you to look for that stuff throughout the day. Sometimes my cup is so full, and I don't wake up and just feel great. I have to look at last night. What went well for me today? What was my win? And there it is. And then the last piece is deeper relationships. And that means real relationships that mean something. And when I say deep, I'm talking about honest, raw connection. None of that superficial nonsense. Because that is what people need, and we are a tribe. And that's what you get. And look at the difference in there. And sustainment, and how high you are. So here's, before you said, yes, I want to go. Here's my initial piece of I went that night, pretty scared. Day 7, and I am on there's no doubt, a honeymoon. And then right here, even 90 days later, even though there was a hint of a drop, look at the post-traumatic growth. And that's what PATH gives you. It is a free program. Yes, the VA is funding it with the Staff Sergeant Fox. If you cannot get in, like let's say you don't meet that criteria, that's okay, because we will find a different kind of funding for you. So it doesn't matter. Whether you be high on the suicide scale, low on the suicide scale, we're still going to fund you, no matter what. And so that's my piece.
Mic drop. Thank you.
That is a lot to follow up to. Thank you. I appreciate it. So, I want to talk to you all now about the WDVA Staff Sergeant Fox Grant Program. And the very first thing I'm going to do is introduce you to our 2 brand new hires. However, only one of them is here at the moment. The other one is helping out. Richard, could you please raise your hand for me? Hi, Richard. Okay, so Richard is our new Regional Service Coordinator. Tony Sandoval is also our new Regional Service Coordinator. And these 2 gentlemen are operating under Staff Sergeant Fox. So Richard is operating out of Skagit, Whatcom Island, and San Juan, while Tony is operating out of here in Chelan, as well as for Grant, Kittitas, and Douglas County. And we'll get to take a look at that map here in a little bit to see where all these overlapping services are happening. But in addition to that, our program is providing a slew of things, and now I'm seeing why everybody stands over here, to include outreach, identifying those who are at risk of suicide, baseline mental health screenings. We're providing education on suicide risk, so on and so forth. I'm not going to read the whole slide to you. You can read just fine. But we're doing some amazing things, some unique things about our programs, and every program has something a little bit unique to them. For example, we have third-party direct payments. Everybody else has this as well. This allows for us to pay other vendors to provide services such as transportation, daycare, suicide prevention stability funds, things like lock boxes for firearms or for prescription medication, and so on and so forth. Very similar to what the other programs are doing. Let's take a look at the service process, right? So this is what you can expect. If you come to us and you are in need of services and you'd like to apply for the program, say for example, Richard's out there in the community and he encounters somebody at a conference and says, hey, we have this amazing program called Staff Sergeant Fox, and here's what it can do. We're gonna have two different entry points that we could potentially start at, right? Over here, when we're doing our outreach, and over here when we have somebody deliberately come to us, right? And they might intersect a little bit. Either way, it's going to route to this intake and eligibility process, and we're going to go through a couple items. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation with you, right? We're going to talk about your needs, talk about your struggles, and we're going to identify suicide risk through natural conversation, right? Because it's not supposed to be a machine, it's not systematic, it's peer-based, right? And those conversations allow for us to see the deeper meaning behind those painful words. So once we identify that there might be a risk for suicide, then we start this intake process. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to verify your military identity, right? Whether that's through SWERS 2.0, DD 214, VA benefits letter, any form of documentation that is legal and accepted, we can use. In addition to that, we're going to conduct two screenings. The first of which is the CSSRS, or Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, and then the psychosocial scale as well. In order to qualify for the program, you have to have a minimum of at least 1 on the CSSRS that indicates that there is a low risk at a minimum for suicide. In addition to that, you have to have at least 1 identified suicide risk challenge on the psychosocial scale. Those 2 items in combination makes you eligible for the program. We go ahead and collect this information, we send it up to the VA, we say we have somebody, they say, yep, they're eligible for the program, go ahead and enroll them. Now what happens next? Well, a whole bunch of different things. So we've moved from this stage and we've either determined if they're eligible or not, right? If they're not eligible, what we'll do is we'll inform them as to why. And then we're going to connect them with a resource that's appropriate for them regardless, right? We're not going to just drop them off and tell them good luck. If they are eligible for the program, we enroll them and then we conduct another round of behavioral health screenings to include the interpersonal, oh my God, I just forgot all of them. The General Self-Efficacy Scale, the PHQ-9, Interpersonal Support Evaluation List, Warwick, am I missing one? Yeah. GSE, yes, General Self-Efficacy Scale. Thank you, I appreciate it. We're going to collect this information because we're going to do pre and post data analysis. Once you come to the program, we want your baseline. And when you're finished with the program and you've met your goals and you're happy with life, hopefully, we'll reevaluate so that we can show that growth, right? So once we get that baseline mental health screen, we're going to determine what is going to be the most appropriate resource for you to be connected with, whether it's with somebody in housing, maybe it's connecting with food resources, education resources, you name it. Anything that we can connect you with, that's what we're here to do, right? We're also going to follow up, right? Continuous ongoing service delivery and reporting, so we're going to check in with you just about every week. Maybe it's every other week. It really depends on what that person's needs are, right? And then as they continue along, we'll reassess and we'll continue to measure those markers and we'll determine on their terms that they've met their goals. And then we'll do our post-assessment, we'll get some communications going, make sure that they're still connected with the resources that they need. So overall, it's a fairly streamlined process, right? It looks a little bit confusing here, there's a lot of branching paths, but ultimately, we're starting here, and all of these roads, get ready for it, lead to whole health. Do you like that? Haha! All right, so let's talk about the CSSRS. So what we are doing with this tool is we're using it as our form of triage. Somebody comes in, they score a minimum of 1, they are eligible for the program. They're going to work with the regional service coordinator doing all the things that I just mentioned. Now, if this individual screens a 2, right, now we're at a moderate level of suicide risk. We have an entire amazing suicide prevention team in the WDVA. We are partnering with them so that we can provide real-time, relevant suicide intervention, conversation skills, you name it, right? So now we've got a partnership specifically with suicide prevention specialists in addition to regional service coordinators to coordinate care and reduce that suicide risk. Now what happens, Eric, if they're at a level 3? Alarms are going off, everything's on fire. Now, so what we're gonna do, if somebody comes in and they're at a level 3, very high risk for suicide, well, we're gonna stop everything. And we're gonna connect them with an immediate resource, whether that's with the VA VA, the suicide prevention coordinators, a primary care provider, whatever it is that we need to get them connected to right then and there. We're gonna help them. If they need assistance getting transportation to a hospital, we will drive them there. We will. We will get them to the care that they need so that this immediate level 3 risk is reduced. And then once it's reduced, however long that takes, whatever steps are needed to get there, then we initiate that level 2 of service. Makes sense, right? So what makes us special? Everything. Well, we have some alternative approaches. I'm real tired, y'all. We have some alternative approaches to suicide prevention, right? I talked a little bit about that third-party direct payment. We also have a services and equipment fund that we have designated funding for alternative behavioral health modalities, right? That could look like equine therapy, that can look like ecotherapy, that can look like resilience strength training, relationship coaching, so on and so forth, right? So we have funding to be able to connect with relatively obscure resources that maybe the VA doesn't necessarily cover. In addition to that, we have 2 really big items here. The first one is up here. You might have heard about this from Keith Meyer earlier today. So we are working in collaboration with the Washington State Healthcare Authority in the development of a veteran certified peer counseling program, and we're going to facilitate it. When we facilitate this, I'll talk about it a little bit, we will have the opportunity to branch out our peer support referral sources, right, out in the community, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here pretty soon. But in addition to that, we're looking at opportunities to provide events, alternative behavioral health type of events. So for example, this September 23rd, we're doing an event with Heart Strides, an equine therapy group, for all of our Staff Sergeant Fox enrolled participants. Free of charge to them, they can bring their families, or even providing the transportation to get there. And then they're going to spend 3 days doing an equine therapy event, completely separated from all of the clinical aspects, away from some of the stressors that they're going through, and give them the opportunity for something a little bit different, right, to change things up. That's neat. So, how are we all collaborating? We've talked a lot about a whole bunch of different programs that are doing amazing things, right? What does that look like in a very simplistic, Eric version of a diagram? Well, as you can see here, our 3 Fox grant recipients are working with our veterans and families, right? But it extends backwards beyond that, right? So we talked about Onward Ops, we talked about VSI. The DVA is working with VSI in the provision of the Veteran Certified Peer Counselor training to also extend an abridged version of the sponsorship training for Onward Ops. So that means when we're out in the community and we're recruiting sponsors, we're also enrolling them in this week-long certification course. So what we are seeing is that Onward Ops is getting a force multiplier, by providing relevant curriculum and certification through the state of Washington that doesn't expire and allows you to be hired as a peer specialist for Medicaid reimbursable services, which is super cool. When we partner that up with sponsorship, now we are rounding out our sponsors even more. So it's extending from working at this point on our end and only catching our veterans and their families to now we're extending 12 to 18 months before they even get out with peer support, suicide prevention, intervention, technical skills, and resource connection, which is really what it's all about, right? So I said I'd show you a map. Here's the map. So, as we mentioned earlier, 9-Line has too many counties.
You don't have enough counties. There's one I still want.
So they have so many counties that they actually overlap with ours. And so these red ones are 9-Line, too close to something. And the blue ones, that kind of is blue on here, right, is WDVA Staff Sergeant. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, all right, well, pretend it's blue. It was blue on the PowerPoint. That's the WDVA Staff Sergeant Fox grant, right? And then over here, you've got ETS sponsorship, Onward Ops collaborative organizations with King County and with Lacey Veterans Hub. And then these white ticks are some of the sponsors that have been trained already. And these white little tick marks are just going to continue to increase as we continue to work together and we recruit more peer support, right? I had mentioned with the CSSRS, if an individual scores a 0, we're still going to refer them to an appropriate resource. That includes peer support too. So that means if we get somebody that scores a 0, we point them towards VSI and ETS, or Onward Ops, or we pair them with VetCorps, or we pair them with anybody that's been trained under the Veteran Peer Corps. You name it. We had tons of peer support elements that are out there, and we had tons of peer support-based programs within the state just with the WDDA alone. For example, that's all of them. We cover a lot of areas, right? We've got 4 different chunks here for suicide prevention. Those are their regions. And then each one of these different colored ticks on here is a different program. So Staff Sergeant Fox in the red, right? Vet Corps, this is the last program here, so it might be a little off. It changes every year. But the yellow is our Vet Corps program, right? Veteran Peer Corps in working with ETS and Onward Ops in their training is our white dots here. And then Veteran Conservation Corps with ecotherapy and peer support is our green ones. And then finally, we have counselors all throughout the state of Washington. Every single one of these pieces are communicating with each other. We're all talking to each other. We're coordinating with each other. We're referring to each other. Because again, no wrong door approach. And now it's not my turn anymore.
That was lovely.
Attention to Straight to Rise. This is a social media campaign that we're doing here locally in Washington. Feel free to grab some stickers, slap it on stuff. It's got the suicide prevention number on it. And we also have some more stickers if you want any. Also, unique to Washington, we have Native Strong Crisis Line. So if you're Native American and you want to speak directly to your Native folks, this is your line you can call, and there are resources specific for Native Americans. Same for LGBTQ. If you want more of those specific resources, this is the number. You can also text now. If you don't want to speak with somebody, you can text. Any questions?
This has been amazing, and just kudos. I'm just blown away by the resources. It's just amazing, and Pat, oh my God, it's just mind-blowing. My question is though, I've been working with Eric Burns. I'm with the City of Seattle, launching an alternative response program. I'm working with the City of Seattle launching an alternative response program and trying to identify the landscape analysis of the different resources that are there. I know we have a strong King County program, but my question is, in terms of the continuum of care, when we have folks who are responding to those 911 and identify the veterans, my question is, are they just requesting when they do self-identify to go to the VA, or are we connecting to those crisis responders, co-responders that are on the scene, responding in that rapid response, and then knowing that these are the resources, aside from the King County, but these are rich resources that can provide that continuum of care, that warm handoff, that can really create a successful outcome for the individuals that we're all touching at different points in their life. And just wanting to make sure, my goal is to create that warm handoff and to know what the landscape is, what all the resources are, so that they are, continuing care, so that there isn't another 911 incident, because they are connected to all these rich resources.
Thank you. I would say the best thing is if 988 is involved, then they can follow up with the suicide prevention coordinator at the VA who has access to this information to connect after the crisis is over and get into this network. Also, what you just said kind of underscores the need of this network, because whoever is the responder, if they're a part of this network, it's an access point, right, to this larger network. So the importance is to get this information out, to work together. So wherever this access point into this network is, it could potentially be any organization out there, right? There's a campaign called Ask the Question, First Responders, are you a veteran? Right? No matter what is going on, are you a veteran? If they say yes, now there's an access point into this whole network of veterans helping veterans, family members helping family members and veterans, people that care helping each other. I hope that answered your question.
It did.
Okay. Did you want to do call to action, or is it kind of?
I think we're there.
We're there? Okay.
Question.
Well, hold on. So for logistics, part of the project that the Staff Sergeant Fox grant works on is identifying those places where folks show up when they need help. So we have our folks out we have our outreach folks that have been going around to the clinics and the emergency rooms and giving our information there, so that when folks present and don't know that there's this whole pile of people cheerleading for them, they're able to find us and we're able to find them. And it's always useful to find out the places that we haven't hit yet. So one of the projects that we are working on with the VA and the suicide prevention team is mapping. So we're mapping in each of the counties, and we've got many contacts and many lists of folks that we're working with to make sure that we can identify those places where people are entering the system. And we are always happy for more participation.
Thank you for that, because I was going to ask about a landscape analysis, because my job, I want to also provide a resource directory, because it may not come to a 98, but I'm sorry.
No. I want to build on that.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So you just said that you want to build a resource directory. We're doing that.
Should we just turn it off?
So we're doing that. Suicide prevention program is actually actively building a suicide prevention resource database where it will be vetted, screened. There will be a recertification process for those organizations that wish to be listed, and then it will be front-facing to the entire public. So you'll be able to go onto this database and search by, service or by location or any combination of what it is that you're looking for, and it will actually hone in on like a bubble, right, that within the 35 miles that you designate, or whatever the case may be, so that it can directly connect you with resources. It's a little bit later down the road, but we are actively working on it. Yeah.
So to answer your question, yes. Right? Sorry, I love them all, they're great. But that was the point, right? So when we did the Governor's Challenge, when we started coordinating the efforts, when we started doing the cross-sectionality, when we started breaking down the barriers, identifying the needs, doing all the things, it was, who are the best people to have at the table? How do we take those best people and branch out? And how do we break down the historic barriers to our most vulnerable and marginalized populations within the counties? So you've heard here today, all of you, kind of what that looks like. And that's just part one, and that's 5 years of work in coordinating just to this point. So just to kind of hit on that, the goal is, and as Eric touched on very beautifully, the goal is to have that mapping and to have all the pieces be able to coordinate. So there's no barrier to access to care, or back to no wrong door policy. Everyone's coordinating, right? You like that? I'm just saying.
And it's a proactive, I want to be very proactive, even if that veteran is not in an active crisis, right? We want to get into.
We would like to avoid all the active crisis we can.
Exactly.
That's the
my
goal of
question.
all of our programs.
So when a police officer or one of our crisis responders gets to a scene and it's low acuity, as soon as they identify themselves as a veteran, we want to connect them and do a warm handoff regardless of the crisis.
So another thing that the VA has recently done is hire community engagement partner coordinators, CEPCs. And one of the projects they're working on is a QR code that will have updated resources and numbers, contacts. So first responders would have these cards, they could give them out in these low acuity cases, or they can scan right there, So the resources at hand, the people to contact, that will be something that will be given out to first responders. Okay,
That's
yeah.
good.
It's okay, either is Eric, we're good.
I was in the Navy.
No one's perfect, it's okay.
Yeah. So my question, I wrote a bunch of notes down here. Great program, by the way. Thanks for letting me know, Aaron. That's why I'm here. And because I'm a gap filler in Skagit County, I find programs will fill in gaps because the VA's process takes forever to do a lot of things. So this right here is just, trust me, you guys are gonna be getting calls and emails because I see a lot of this stuff. One of the questions I had though is like, since Whidbey Island's just right there down the street from us, how do you guys?
Let me ask a question. Is there anybody here that lives in Whidbey Island? This is my outreach coordinator, Dave.
Yeah, I know.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So my question is, I see you guys reaching out to active duty early on. What if they're on deployment? What if they're, what are you guys doing down at JBLM or up at Whidbey and they're on deployment? For example, I was on deployment and I got out 30 days later. There was no way that I could ever had any transitional time while I'm on a carrier, out in the Indian Ocean. So how do you guys reach out to those folks that are unable, even, our soldiers and our Marines are spending a year on deployment right before they get out. So how do you guys do that?
So our illustrious outreach coordinators are working with command to identify those folks, and they face the same difficulty with the shortened span that anybody who's going to leave right after deployment has, and it's a relevant problem, but we're looking at commands to be able to discuss that and identify those folks, but they have the same problems because they're getting all the other transition stuff thrown at them at the same time. So that's why we want to kind of cheerlead the onward ops so that those folks are getting out and finding that sponsorship, and then they can connect with folks here where they're leaving or in their area of destination. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, but I just don't understand how we can reach people that are.
So you can enroll in Onward Ops online, and I'm sorry, I was Army, I don't know, does Navy have internet out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Okay. So again, it's program awareness is where we're at, because as long as they have access to the internet, they can enroll in Onward Ops, even if they're in the middle of the Atlantic, they don't have to be on US soil. And they can start the process then, they don't have to wait till they get back.
Well, and we have someone, the Amazing Wizard of Oz, also known as Mary Forbes, who, it was happening. So what we do, we have that coordinated effort, right? So it goes back down to that trickle effect. If one layer of that positive overlap doesn't work, the next one can. And so we have those relationships built in. And again, it always comes back to, not only do we like each other, believe it or not, we actually work very well together on that federal, state, and local nonprofit platform, the counties, everyone. So that's the goal, right? To fill in the gaps where we go. Because if we have someone who self-identifies, because realistically, we're not gonna know if Joe America in Iraq needs help until he's offered the resource, which is available for him to access. Then we know, and then we can connect with Joe America and help him with his transition. And there's no period of time to that, but yeah, that's where that kind of starts.
Send out like a box with a pamphlet in it, say, hey.
So we try not to. We try not to
Right.
because you don't get good feedback from that, right? So to be honest, we try and connect with the human beings because that seems to be, FaceTime seems to be the best way to get the warm handoff.
Yeah, so you've identified one of the target populations
Yeah.
who's more high at risk. Okay, so ideally, we could use your help in getting the word out on these programs to the people you engage, especially the commands that you engage. So if they're more aware of these programs before deployments or as you're ramping up for deployments, then the commands can identify those quick turners, those the population of service members who are transitioning within 90, 180 days from post-deployment. They need to start preparing pre-deployment.
And I didn't articulate this because we were trying to hurry. One of the things that's fantastic about the Staff Sergeant Fox program is that family members are eligible. So it didn't occur to me until you asked the question, we need to go to the ombudsman. And we need to let the ombudsman know that we're here. So that's my boy texted to me, Marcus, and I'll tell you.
Oh, Mary, I live in Mount Vernon.
I know, I told him to call me.
They're coming to your house for breakfast.
I love it.
I'll just be quick. So, some of these can you go back to the map, please? Okay. That one, or the other one. So I'm from one of those counties that has nothing on it. How do I start reaching out to you and expand these services?
Absolutely.
9-line?
Yeah, come here right here and get that card.
Which county? The one that nobody ever knows about.
That's not true.
That one.
Okay.
Oh.
And besides her.
It's a good point, but this is only Staff Sergeant Fox. We have House Bill 5358, and we have the PACT Act. And I know you're impacted by one of them.
I am.
My brain's not fast enough at 4 p.m.
But what I'm specifically referring to in this discussion
Yeah.
is counseling and mental health.
Right, well, this program also applies to all counties in the state.
Okay.
Our contract we have with Onward Ops
covers the whole state. So if
Okay.
we get a veteran, is gonna go through,
We're in her region. If we're in the state, we're in her region. And she is from heaven, and she is so kind and sweet, and will hook you up no matter what.
Well-
So let us know.
Well, and keep in mind too, that's why this team exists, right? So that overlap happens. But again, in situations where one of us can't be there, the other one can. That's where that coordination of care is actually happening.
Okay. One more question for you. Forgive my pointing. But what's the difference between what you're talking about and the company called Gap Solutions? And the only reason that I have that is because we actually have a Gap Solutions rep that comes over from Idaho. And so she's a transition assistant for active duty, but she's mostly Army, like you. So I guess that was my question, is what's the difference between those two programs?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Gap Solutions, but what I would tell you is that if it's a like peer support program, our program tries to enable other programs. So we don't try to take the place of.
Sure.
We certainly don't want to do that, because if Gap Solutions is having a positive effect in Asotin County, have at it. But in order to get access to service members before they transition, the database, the partnership with Google Workspace in Washington State with all the other programs that you're seeing up here and connection to veteran benefits and healthcare, okay? That's where our program, we feel, is a little better suited.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah.
And
Thanks
if
for
you
asking.
want to volunteer to become a sponsor,
There we go.
scan the QR code.
Soon.
yes, how do you do that, did you say?
You can. So if you go to onwardops.org, okay, there's a spot down at the bottom. The upward part is focused on transitioning service members. But if
Microphone, please.
This is why we can't have nice things.
It is.
So if you go to the website, you scroll down to the bottom, there's an opportunity for you to click and sign up to be a sponsor.
For the recording, can you say the website again?
Yes, it's onwardops.org. Yes.
That is Onward Ops. All right, we have one more question in the back. Come on up.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, real quick. I started working for Highland County about 4 months ago. Within the first week, Eric, we spoke. You gave me the details about Sergeant Fox. And then I know I work with Dave. So it's great. So yeah, veteran facing, it seems like there's no wrong doors. And when I reached out to you guys, anytime I have a question, you're like, just let me know, I'll take care of it. But is there an easiest door for us to come in through for you guys? I guess is there a way to look at that?
Do you mean for Staff Sergeant Fox related specifically?
For any program, if I have any veteran that's transitioning, and I think maybe something mental health.
If you reach out to me, I will connect you with any resource you need me to.
Right. And Dave says the same thing. So is there a
The
way
answer is no.
Yeah.
The answer is no, because it depends on what the veteran needs and what the family needs. So we don't know the answer to the question until we understand the better questions to ask.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So finding the folks that tell you they will help, that's the best way. That's exactly.
No wrong door.
Right.
Well, and we're the best at poor self-care. So
anytime, day or night, somebody's up
It's the
probably
best.
texting each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, folks, if there's no other questions, I just want to reiterate our appreciation for you joining us today.
Marcus raised his question. We had to ask a question.
Do you have a question?
Go to bed.
Go to sleep, Marcus.
I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time to sit down with us and learn about the amazing things that every single one of us is doing, even you. You're all being part of this larger machine that is peer support and care and behavioral health for our veterans and their families. That's all we have today, folks.
And we have cards and contact information up here. Please come and get them.
Yes.